Welcome, everybody. Let's talk real estate. Your weekly BS with Barry Saywitz about the current commercial real estate market here in Southern California. As we take a no BS look at both sides of the issues driving this market today to find the best solutions going forward. With our man right in the middle, it's Barry Saywitz. Hey, Barry.
Hey, good morning, Paul, and good morning to all of our viewers and our listeners out there. It is Tuesday. I am Barry Saywitz. We are in the middle of January 2025, and we are going to talk some real estate, and we're going to mix in some other topics. I am Barry Saywitz, president of the Saywitz Company, and if it's one thing that I've learned in all of my years in real estate and all of the shows that we've done now at this point, it's you never know what to expect, and we have the same thing again this week here in Southern California dealing with all kinds of issues. And so our guest for this morning, unfortunately, was directly involved with implications from the fires in Los Angeles, unable to make it to the show, obviously dealing with more important issues, and we wish her and her family and her business all the best, and we'll get her back on the show. In the meantime, that gives us the opportunity to talk about what really is going on with the fire situation in Los Angeles. You turn on the news, you listen to the internet, whether it's national news or whether it is the local news, and that's really almost all that they're talking about. And so we're not experts on the fire itself, but we thought we would talk about the implications of what happens from the fire and the fallout and how it really will affect us going forward, whether you're directly involved with the fire or not. So Paul and I will have a little discussion, and we'll try and make it as interesting as we can. And first of all, I want to say to all the people out there that are directly affected by the fire, our thoughts and our prayers are certainly with you. And to all the firefighters and first responders out there, we always appreciate you, and certainly in these instances, for what you do each and every day. So thank you. So with all of that said, I was told we were going to have a live audience of about 5,000.
Is that it? Oh, they would be, but they're all attending to the fires.
I think they're at home. I expected a big, long line here at the studio, and then when I got here,
you didn't see them.
But now I can only hope that everyone is tuning in and listening, and we'll try and...
I'll tell you, I'm not going to make too many of these bad jokes, but it's a hot topic today here, the fires and the fallout. I don't even think we've begun to really understand or assess the damage, much less what comes next. Let's talk about the damage. I lived up in that area. You went to school at UCLA. That's right on the edge of Pacific Palisades there. I was in the entertainment industry for years, off of Sunset there, the Hollywood Hills, and then you go over across the freeway into Pacific Palisades. Lots of clients, writers, actors, directors live up in those areas there, particularly the Pacific Palisades, and apparently it's gone. It's like flat. I can't wrap my head around that.
Yeah, and obviously we all watch what's going on in the news, and while I appreciate all the input and what these people do to report the news, they always seem to make the disasters the worst, and that's what makes for some TV drama.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is you really have devastation, and it's still going on, right? And there are still hot spots, even as we speak this morning, that have new hot spots that have popped up in Ventura County that they're saying are a result of byproducts of the Palisades fire or embers that get pushed around. And the winds, again, today are back at 30, 40, 50 miles an hour. And while it's fairly calm here in Orange County where we are, they have high alerts. I took a drive through Santiago Canyon over the weekend, and when I noticed that there were fire trucks patrolling around just looking for potential...
And fire watchers. I've never seen that. People with signs saying fire watcher, and they got little binoculars out.
And I haven't had a chance to research it, but I think these are volunteers, because it was basically people standing beside their car with one of those little real estate magnet signs that said fire watcher and an orange or a yellow jacket. And I saw, I don't know, at least a half a dozen of them in the short
I've never seen that all the years I've lived here. I've seen a bunch of them around. All right, so let's talk about how construction. I just keep wondering, are we going to keep doing it? Are we going to rebuild these the same way with wood construction, and 10 years, 20 years, 5 years, we're going to have the same sort of things? Like in Malibu, the mudslides happen, and they just shore up the hill, and they put another house there, and then a mudslide happens again. Is there anything to be learned out of this in terms of construction? Should we be building metal houses, concrete houses, other sorts of things? Or
I think, again, I'm no expert on it, but we're not through what is going on now. So for us to predict the fallout and what's going to happen is conjecture at this point. But the byproducts of what's going to happen from these fires is that the people that own these houses that were destroyed are going to either rebuild on the same lot that they had with their own money and the insurance money. And we'll talk about the insurance piece in a second. or they're just going to sell the lot and move someplace else. They're either going to say, hey, I've had it with California and go to a different state for less money.
Or emotionally, it's hard to face it. And
or just move to a different part of town that might be in a different, lower risk, or just go and say, hey, look, I don't have the stomach to rebuild.
Right.
I'm just going to go buy another house or rent until I can figure it out. And so there are all these fallouts that you're going to see happen as a result of these people being displaced. And then secondly, it's not just the Palisades, because you have Altadena, you have Hollywood Hills, you have other areas where people are being displaced. And then the byproduct of people being displaced and disruptive affects, I say at the end of the day, almost all of us to some degree.
Yeah.
And I'll give you some examples of that. My parents live in the Palm Desert area, nowhere near the fires, 2 hours away. They have not had internet for a week. The reality of it is their entire complex that they live in signed a contract with a new internet provider that is based in Pacific Palisades. And their main tower for the internet burnt up and blew up, and they haven't been able to figure out how to switch the signal to either some other service or make a deal with another company or rebuild the tower or what have you. And you have an entire community of people that have no internet. Now, is that the end of the world versus having your house burned down? No, but this is a fallout of what's going on.
And how far the fallout, for how many people are going to be inadvertently or directly affected by what's happened there. Let's start with the one thing. How does this stuff burn? Because these are big, beautiful homes. For the thing, you would think they have the greatest, latest roofs, and they've got all sorts of fire protection things and stuff. But you said something interesting. Be the fire, when the winds are that strong, the embers come in through the vents, and now your attic catches fire.
You have many ways that it burns, right? Well, number one, you see this 40, 50-foot wall of flame, and if it's being pushed by a 40 or 50 mile an hour wind, it moves very quickly. And so I have friends in the valley that I spoke to, and they said, hey, the flames were on top of the hill, and then the next thing I know, 3 minutes later, they're 100 yards from my backyard.
Yeah.
The problem is people have wood. Even if you have a stucco home or even if you have a brick home, there's wood, right? So whether that's the brush around your home, whether that's trees, whether that's a pergola, whether that's a fence that you might have, there are other wood structures, and as soon as those catch on fire, then once the house is engulfed, you're in big trouble. The other thing is that they've talked about on the news even this morning that this new fire in Ventura County is a result of embers being pushed with the wind from the Palisades 50 miles north or 30 miles north, and then catching something else, and that the brush is so dry because there hasn't been any rain. And what they were saying is that we haven't had rain or any substantial amount of rain only one day in the last 9 months, which happened to be the night of the charity function that I hosted.
Yes, I was there. The only time it rained was
the only time. What kind of luck is that? But
you should throw more functions.
I don't know, but so everything is very dry, and so it's very brittle, and it just burns very quickly. It's also interesting that when I was out driving over the weekend, I saw like a whole parade of police cars with a single guy who was handcuffed on the side of the road with no car. And apparently he must have been walking around in the bushes near Santiago Canyon.
Yeah.
And they just treated him as a high risk because many of these fires they're saying now are a result of arson, right? Or
wrap your head around
the stories are out there in terms of that these just didn't start all by themselves, or at least the first one, and then it spread. So whether the embers get into your roof, and if your roof attic is wood or you have insulation or things that can burn up, once it gets inside the house, you have an issue and you're done. And then there's no way to stop it when the wind is swirling. So for those people that are here in Southern California we're talking about, it's not a light breeze. This is a swirling wind.
So do you think, are we ever going to talk about changing building codes, setbacks, other sorts of things and stuff? You had the guy in from Nile Homes last year sometime out of this building here. He's experimenting with tilt-up concrete like they do in commercial real estate.
But that still doesn't save the insides and the trees and everything around your home. You have entire neighborhoods that are just virtually destroyed. And so the question really is not so much about how things will get rebuilt. That is a question, but I think the flip side of that is, will I ease on permits in a particular city or area to help people be able to rebuild quickly to get them back into their homes? But the real question you got to ask is, if my house burned down, what do I do now? Right? Do I go talk to my insurance company, haggle with them about what I'm going to get for my home? Did I have enough coverage? What kind of coverage is available? And then do I take that money and go try and buy a different home because I need to move? Do I go try and rent something in the meantime just to be able to get a roof over my head? And then if I'm renting something, is the insurance company going to give me enough money to be able to rent something? And then do I have to shell out money, and all my stuff might be gone. And even if my house wasn't destroyed, maybe my car burnt up, maybe I have stuff that's smoke damaged.
My clothes, my car, everything, my records.
And these are people that are starting over, but then it also impacts the businesses around these homes that relied on these people to come to the neighborhood stores and businesses. They're not coming. Or I saw a story on the news where it had a gentleman in Altadena, which is the Eaton fire, which is near Pasadena, and his house burnt. His mother lived down the street in his childhood home where he grew up. Her house burnt, and he had a business in downtown Altadena on one of the main streets, and the entire street burnt up. So his business, his home, his mother's home, all destroyed.
Overwhelming.
And all the people, he had a local business, and so the people, his customers, he was saying, were all from the neighborhood, and they're all gone. So you have now a guy whose family is homeless, who is unemployed, and all his stuff is gone. And surprised on how good spirits he was in, and that he was actually trying to help others. But eventually these people have to help themselves.
I'm not trying to pick on insurance companies, but our perception is they're going to find ways to wiggle out of things. Maybe I'm being harsh, but are they going to respond quickly? Is the money going to flow freely? Or are there going to be big debates about what you get paid? And I don't really know. Do I have great insurance or lousy insurance?
Well,
I really
people are
don't
going to
know.
find out. Let's talk about the insurance piece, which is, did I have enough insurance? If I lived in my home for 40 years, like a lot of these people did,
right,
and I had an older structure that I didn't pay that much for the structure, that may not have been worth as much, or maybe it was worth a decent amount of money, but really purely based on the land and the location, not so much the home itself, right? And so I might not have had that much coverage. And if I had an old policy, which was just a cheap policy, and I just kept renewing it, and I never got these big increases like other people, I may have inadequate insurance, and I may be in big trouble. Now, the converse of that is a person who bought their home recently, who paid a lot of money or remodeled it or built from scratch or bought it from a developer who spent a bunch of money. They may have a bunch of insurance, but now they have to go duplicate that very nice new house. And then how do I do that? Because the reason I bought my house is because of what it was. Now I can't do that.
And construction costs are up, and it's more expensive to build, and you're going to have a shortage of labor. All these contractors are going to be they're going to be
again, good
hard
news,
to get on
bad
the phone.
news. So we'll have to see how it plays out. But some people have said to me, look, the rental market should shoot up because all these people...
You would think so.
Yeah, but you also, again, you hear on the news that there's 20,000 structures have been destroyed, which is a huge amount of structures. But when you actually add up the number of homes, it might only be 5,000 homes. And I don't want to say only, because it's still a terrible thing. But relative to 20,000, those structures might have been barns or sheds or garages or guest houses. Those didn't displace people. Right, but so some of these people, I think, are just going to move out of the area, and they just go, "Hey, now's the time. I can't really afford California, and I'm gonna go." Right, and the insurance money I got's not enough to do what I need to do here. I'm going to go to some place that's a lower cost of living, or I'll go stay with relatives for a while and regroup. You have other people that are going to go out and try and buy something quickly or rent something to get into something so that they're not, displaced. And then you have others that are going to try and figure it out, and then I'm not sure what they do. I also believe that people that may have been, and most of these fires are in higher-end areas, unfortunately, regardless of where it is, but you have people in those areas that may have been equity rich and cash poor.
Right.
And so those people are going to struggle to go find something else. And so then you have landlords. One, the rental market was already pretty tight. The sales market was already pretty tight. And now I think you're going to see either prices go up, sellers hold to their number, even though interest rates are still high, and you're going to see inventory at an even lower level. And then the new construction that might come on board to replace the stuff that got burnt down is all people rebuilding their own stuff. And some of these very expensive homes, they'll take 2 years to rebuild. So you're not going to see any change in the inventory in the market anytime soon, other than additional tightness. So I spoke to a client of mine who had a home for rent in Dana Point, which is nowhere near the fires, here in Orange County. He said he had it on the market for 3-4 months, didn't get any bites for it, and then last week it rented at a ridiculous amount of money because somebody from LA needed to get out, and they're looking to get further away from the fires, and they just panicked and took a lease and signed a year lease and paid the price. On the one hand, you may see more of that. On the other hand, look at the flip side. We have vacation rental properties at the beach in Newport. Again, nowhere near the fires, but people who were coming to vacation to Orange County from areas outside of Southern California who don't understand the dynamics, they view Newport Beach as L.A. And so somebody coming from Kansas City that was going to come on their vacation says, forget it, I'm not coming. Air quality, I believe, is bad, even though the sky is blue in Orange County and it's terrible in L.A., and I don't want the risk, I'm just canceling. So now you have this whole impact to the tourism aspect of Southern California. Nobody's going to want to come here for vacation. They're just going to bail and go other places. And look, you talk about Disneyland, you talk about Universal Studios, anything that was big tourist attractions is going to suffer. And then secondly, those are outside where you have poor air quality for real. So now you have...
You're just you're adding layer of layer onto this thing here.
So the flip side is the construction industry, I think, should get a boost in that there'll be all kinds of business. But then you're going to run into the risk where you have a difficult time finding a contractor or a carpenter or a framer or a concrete guy.
Which you've been complaining about and everybody else has been complaining about since COVID. That's been a difficult, tight market.
And it finally was starting to ease because construction was down and there was less jobs for these people. But the good news is if you're in construction, I think you'll have plenty of opportunities going forward. But the other issue is how long is it going to... It's not like you start rebuilding tomorrow or next week or next month.
Here's a question. Maybe this is a silly question, but I always picture when there's a hurricane and it flattens, or a tornado and it flattens, or this fire wipes out stuff. Are there, I'll call them opportunists, vultures that descend on these neighborhoods and say, here, I'll give you 50 cents on the dollar, you can get outright, and I'll take advantage of the emotion, and here, I'll just buy this property cheaper, and I'll give you card cash right now. Do people like that appear? I don't know.
I guess we'll see. I think that there will be opportunities. I think you'll have a lot of people that had very large plots of land with an older house, and the house wasn't worth anything, and now that it's gone, for them to have the resources to rebuild, that may not be the case. And so you will have spec developers come in, buy the land, and then build a home. But again, I'm building a custom high-end home.
These aren't tract homes,
No, and it's going to take me 18 to 24 months to build it. So, and then the issue is if I'm the developer, you still have to borrow money, right? So let's talk about interest rates, which have not come down.
Yes.
They've, in fact, gone up, right? So you have that aspect of it working against you. If you're a developer or you're going to go do construction and you need a construction loan, you're going to be borrowing still in the mid to high sixes as an interest rate. And so that further complicates what's going on. And then now you have new administration. Trump administration is going to come in a week. They're saying he's going to have 100 different declarations.
Supposedly he's going to have 100 presidential orders here.
But you also have the Fed saying, listen, inflation really not doing what we wanted it to. Job market was up overall across the country. Therefore, they've downgraded the idea that interest rates will come down or that we will have 4 or 5 drops in interest rates. So the byproduct of that is now you can look at, hey, if my interest rate's in the 6s, I might maybe get down to 6, or I might get in the high 5s. I'm not getting down to 5 or anywhere below it for sure. And then you have the stock market reacting to all of that, and so you see a big slide, no Santa Claus effect in December, and then continued more slides and volatility in January. And so people who were feeling good about their stock portfolio, feeling good about the fact that, hey, I got the new administration and there's some positive things in the economy, now you just get stymied with it. And for Southern California, was already struggling with all kinds of other issues, right? And so while it is a great place to live and the weather and everything else, you have the second highest unemployment in the country.
Really?
In California.
I didn't know that.
Yes. And so while unemployment as a whole is down, California's second highest unemployment, right? And you also have the highest concentration of immigrants and migration from across the southern border, taking jobs from good, hardworking people, making it difficult. And then you have a certain amount of people who just don't want to go back to work because they're milking it, getting the unemployment or disability or whatever they're doing, that they're just not going back to work. And so you still have that going on. Then you have the homeless issue. Then you have the crime issue. Then you have the graffiti and the destruction of public property. I have properties in Anaheim have been graffitied 3 out of the last 4 days.
Oh.
Right? Wow. I have homeless people in 5 different properties that we've removed, politely, that we've asked to leave, that they didn't. We've had them arrested. We've had them removed by the police, and they keep coming back. And they're building shanties on our property. They're defecating. They're damaging the properties. And so while I feel for the homeless, this is an ongoing problem. This is just me. I'm not the only guy who's experiencing this. You have all these bad things going on. I don't want to sound like Negative Nancy, but then you throw this whole economic game changer of the fires on top of it.
I'll give you one more here, and I don't want to go too deep into politics, but
we can. Maybe more people will tune in. I don't know.
We used to, when there was a disaster, we put aside our differences and we all came together. I remember the famous picture of Obama and Chris Christie hugging when there's a huge hurricane that devastated New Jersey, and he caught tons of flack for that. Nobody wants to be seen supporting the other side. L.A., Orange County, L.A., California, Democratic stronghold. Now you've got Trump, who has made it very clear he's not real pro-California anyway here.
And you made it clear from Gavin Newsom that he is no fan of Trump and he's going to do everything he can to buck Trump's agenda.
So will that impede federal money? I fear that federal money, that they're just going to go, you feel that way? Then screw you. We're not giving you the money here.
Yeah, and I think that it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, because you're not hearing Biden or Harris from California. You're not seeing her doing anything in the news.
She lives in Brentwood, not far away.
And you're not seeing Biden talk about it other than, hell, it's terrible, because they only have a week left. And so I think you're going to see Trump take action because he wants to do the right thing for the people. The question is, how do you get that money in the right people's hands? I think you're going to see him put strings on that money. And I don't think you're going to see him just give it to Newsom and say, here, you do what you want with it, as he would if it were DeSantis in Florida. Right? I think the trust level's just not there.
And at a certain level, let him suffer here. Let the Democrats suffer. Let the mayor of L.A., let him. In other words, we'll slow walk some of this stuff, or maybe even not support some of this stuff, simply to punish the other side.
Yeah, and I don't think that the agenda is to punish the average working person.
Not the average person, but the politicians.
Along the way, I don't mind. I think if you're Trump and the Trump administration, you can say, I don't mind taking jabs at, look at what you did. You already saw Trump come out and say, I told Newsom you should trim the trees, and then he was too cheap to do it. And so he was focused on other things that he didn't even accomplish. And you look at the mayor of L.A., who says, my number one agenda is homelessness, right? You've done nothing of substance to resolve the homeless issue in terms of getting people off the street or creating places for them to go that would be any kind of a changer where you could say, look, we're making progress. Now, whatever, I'm sure you're doing stuff, but I'm not seeing it, right? And I'm not seeing it in the neighborhoods where we own property and where I'm going to. It looks the same or worse to me.
You don't own any property anywhere near any of these areas.
I own properties near there, but not directly affected by the fires. The implication of this is if I have tenants at a property and they worked at a business impacted by the fire, and they can't go to work and they're out of work, guess what happens? I can't pay my rent. Who's affected? Me.
Yeah.
And them, certainly. I feel like it will, the impact of this will be even more. And so if I said, look, as a landlord, I feel for you, I'll work with you as best I can, but at some point, I can't have you not paying the rent for some extended period of time. We're going to have to figure something out. And then if you have to move and you have no place to go because you don't have a job, what have you done? You've increased this homeless issue.
So what is a commercial real estate guy like yourself? You've got properties all over Southern California here. Is there, you had Bill Shopoff in here, guys redeveloping malls and giant warehouses stuff. What's the emergency plan? Do you have a behind glass, a special book that, only in case of emergency we break, and then this is our emergency protocol and procedure?
I wish there was one. I'd go on Amazon and buy it, but there's no playbook for any of these things, whether it was COVID or whether it's this. And we just don't know what the fallout's really going to be at the end of the day. I think people that have long-term projections relative to real estate, that this is a short-term impact that may have longer-term implications, but you're not going to deter my overall game plan or strategy. I am sitting like everybody else going, what's going to happen next, right? Mm-hmm. And so number one, you've still got 2 or 3 more days here of high winds and very low humidity.
Yeah,
and it could get worse and it could spark up. And then secondly, and we've had properties in areas that are not directly in the fire path, but we've had pieces of roofs blow off. We've had furniture end up in pools. We've had fences down, doors blown off, right? And these are common things that are nowhere near getting your house burned down, but damage and destruction and cost and having to deal with it for everybody. I can't wait for Trump to take over and do whatever he's going to do. Hopefully that'll be a positive step.
Or does he say, I'm not going to do anything, boo for you because you didn't vote for me?
But look, you listen to the news, and this morning they announced that they believe that they have a ceasefire with Hamas in Israel. Now, we'll see if it comes true. We'll see if Hamas actually honors it, which they haven't done in the past, and then they talk, and then they pull back. The fact of the matter is Trump said, hey, by the time I take office, we're going to have a deal. And so it'll be interesting to see if they do.
Right.
That would be one moving piece of a chessboard of moving pieces of what's going on. But at the same time, I think the federal government will step in and provide money. But I just question how that trickles down to a business that is gone or an employee that lost their job as a result of it. Right, there's immediate Red Cross money, and they announced it on the football games, and you can donate, and people are doing that, and we've done that. That's to get people immediate relief and food and shelter and blankets and clothing. That doesn't solve the economic impact of what's going on.
All right, the other one hanging over our heads, we've already seen it happen in the last couple of years, insurance going through the roof. Yeah. What happens when all these roofs have to get replaced? Are the insurance companies just going to pull out again? They were already starting to pull out. Are they going to have the financial? Are any of them going to go bankrupt? Is this going to? I saw some estimates of what they think this will cost. It'll be the largest fire ever in the history of America in terms of property and casualty.
And part of that is a function of the fact that the value of these homes is so high.
Exactly.
If they were in middle America, nothing against middle America, but you might have homes at $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 a piece. These homes are $5, $10, $20 million in many of these areas.
Right.
And even the lower end homes are $1 million or $2 million, just not a cheap play. You have that, plus you have the cost to rebuild, where you have high construction costs, high labor costs in California, and that all adds to the amount of the loss. The question will be, and we don't know the answer, I can't get my insurance companies on the phone.
That's what you said, yeah.
I have policies that are expiring. I have one that expires today. I've been working on it for the last week. They finally agreed to renew it and just roll it over. All I was doing is running around. I couldn't even get a response from anybody. If you wanted to get a new policy, or you got dropped, or you wanted to go shop around for something cheaper, or you bought a house or a property and wanted to go you can't get a quote from anybody at the moment because they're all panicked and dealing with the immediate issue, as they should with the fire people. But you may have companies come back and say, which they've already said, they've said, hey, Riverside County, because of the fires a couple of years ago, is a fire zone. There are parts of Riverside County that are in the desert that don't have any trees.
Exactly.
You're going to have insurance companies come back and just panic and go, look, we're not writing policies. Or if we do write the policy.
Which they were doing in the last couple of years. You said you got turned down. Others came on your show and said, oh, there's something going on. Take satellite photos. There's a tree near your apartment building. We're not going to underwrite you unless you cut the trees down.
And look, we've had properties where I had the insurance company said, look, we want a list of all the improvements that you did to renovate the property to make sure that the property is in good condition. And I said, okay, here's a list. Then they came back to me and said, we want the receipts for the work that you did.
Wow.
I said, you realize the work was done 4 years ago. Secondly, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars with dozens and dozens of vendors. I don't have those receipts anymore. Really? You want the receipt from Home Depot from 4 years ago for putting in a new heater or something? So they made me get a letter from a general contractor who was the contractor at the time who helped us to write it all out and explain what happened so that they had something to cover their butts in the file. They were not fact-checking what I did. I said, look, come out to the property, do an inspection.
Right.
Here are pictures of all the units. Here are pictures of the work that we did. I'm giving you a sworn statement as the owner of the property, and it didn't matter. So you're going to see all kinds of fallout from the insurance companies on what they're doing and their practices and how that goes. You're going to see other companies continue to bail out of California. You're going to see companies that were here that are going to limit the amount of policies that they're going to write because they can only write so much, right? And then you may see a couple of other companies, which they were starting to do, come back, but now they're just going to go away.
Can you imagine what the cost will be now for those that still... So all these homes...
Well, what about the guy who has a 40-year-old roof, who says, look, I've lived in my home for 40 years. It's fine. I never had to replace it. I don't have any leaks. Insurance company's going to go, you have a 40-year-old roof, and if your house caught on fire or the chances of you having a leak or something happening with that roof are high, I'm not insuring you. You need to go get a new roof. And then that roof could be $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. And then you just got stuck either spending that, or if you're not going to do that, go to a different carrier who's going to charge you 300 or 400% more than what you're paying.
It was like trickle down. I had, this isn't fire related, but a couple of years ago, as we've talked about, I talked about it endlessly. I couldn't believe it. I had the typical water leak on a 20-year-old home, and I thought that's what I have insurance for. They came out, they fixed it, all that stuff, and then they promptly dropped me.
Yeah.
And then I went to other carriers and they said, you've had one claim in 20 years? We were not going to write that policy. So I had to go to the state, this giant fund that's getting bloated and bloated.
Yeah,
more
and
more.
you get crappy coverage.
You get crappy coverage at 2 or 3 times the price.
Yes, and then you have to try and come back and deal with it in a couple of years. And now this event is going to prolong and make it even worse. And I have no good thoughts coming my way in terms of how that's going to impact what's going on.
I think it's going to be an insurance nightmare.
Right, well, which then gets back to, look, if the cost of insurance goes up for everybody. Look, if you are not in the fire zone and you haven't had any losses on your home, guess what's going to happen to you? Your insurance rates are going up too.
Almost
you just
sure.
watch, right?
Absolutely.
And it's not going up 2 or 3 or 4%, right? It's going up 20, 30, 100, 200, 300%. Everybody's going to come back and second guess and go, if you didn't do this or you didn't do that, they're already doing it. Did you upgrade the electrical? Did you upgrade the plumbing?
Right.
Did you put a new roof on? Did you put energy efficient lights?
Did you cut back your trees? Did you do all this other stuff?
And now what they're doing with satellite technology is that they first of all, they never used to come out and even look. Then some companies would send a guy out that they'd hire, and he'd walk around the property, take some pictures, wouldn't do anything really, and just, oh, it looks nice, the grass is green, it's fine. Now they started sending guys out, and they would make a list. Oh, the paint is chipped here. This light is crooked. Stupid things that an insurance company would never even want, and then you'd have to fix them or they would drop you.
Yeah.
Now what's happening is with satellite technology, they'll just look and go, hey, your trees are touching the house. I want them trimmed.
Exactly.
Right? Your fence looks like it's old and needs a coat of paint. Put some paint on it. Mm-hmm. And so you're going to see a lot more of that, which is then going to translate into construction work, which is going to make construction costs go up. And then who's going to pay? The consumer. Right? So there are many ways that the consumer is going to get hit with what's going on here. At the end of the day, I see it coming.
Does any of this ever make it unaffordable, but for the very few, to live in places like Southern California or Florida too? Florida's going through we're only not with all the hurricanes that keep happening. I hear they have the same issues going down there. Not today.
But the difference is in Florida, unless you're in certain selective, very high-end places, it's more affordable overall. Cost of living is much less. Gas is less, right? Insurance, while high there, is still less because the values are lower. The tough part about Southern California and California in general is you have high values of real estate, high cost of living overall. And so something's got to give, right? And
so that's what I'm saying, right?
So now, so what's interesting is now I was listening on the news this morning before I came over, and there are rumors that there are people talking about calling for the resignation of the mayor of Los Angeles because that she was ill-prepared. She's in a fight with the fire chief. She defunded the police. She defunded the fire department.
Out of the country when it happened.
Out of the country when it happened. Couldn't read the speech they wrote for her effectively. And you have...
Sorry to laugh, but yeah, that was...
Yeah, but okay, so now you're talking about change.
So political fallout.
We'll see whether it's a different person that's a Democrat that just has better leadership qualities or whether there's a movement for something else remains to be seen. But the fact of the matter is everybody wants to point the finger, right? They've established a special task force. Hey, great.
And
now what does that
do
for you and me and the people
I wonder what it would look like. We tried to get Rick Caruso on the show here when he came through town and give a talk here. I'd love to reach out to him again and see if I'm sure he has opinions about if he'd become mayor, what he would have done different, what he'd be doing different now here.
And look, in times of crisis, people that are natural leaders that can adapt to it, they step up, and I guess we'll see. And all we can do is hope that the people that are in charge take the opportunity to do that and help the people in need.
And is this all, last question, the precursor to the big one? Since I moved to California in the 80s, I was always worried about the big one, the major earthquake that someday due, supposedly, that will make every other earthquake pale in comparison. We've prepared through better building codes and whatnot, but roads, bridges, sewers, all that stuff, it just seems like that's another thing hanging out there. Fire was not one I expected all the time.
Yeah, you look at the infrastructure that's impacted by just the fires, whether that's gas lines, power lines, right? You still have hundreds of thousands of people without power in those areas that are affected. And so you have infrastructure rebuilding that's going to have to get done with public funds.
And what about the utility? The one fire they're suspecting maybe it was, again, a sparking power line, although the power companies are now proactively shutting down power when the winds go up to a certain level. They shut it down in my area for a little while, and we're 1 million miles away. Isn't that just going to make utilities a couple of more lawsuits.
Oh, yeah. Well,
more
look, there have already been lawsuits filed against the city, against Southern California Edison. I think you're going to see more of this. And then whether that gets passed along to the consumer with higher rates at the end of the day, then everybody's affected. And so it just adds to the cost of living. And I guess we'll just have to see how it goes. I'm hoping that the winds calm down in a couple of days.
Yes.
I'm hoping that they can get their arms around the fires. And then you definitely see in these areas a show of force with police and firefighters and these fire watch people that there's not more of this, that it's just got to be a sick person that will want to come out and then just start a fire for no reason.
Look, good news, it does seem to bring communities together. It does seem to bring out volunteers. We'd have a tendency to lock hands and help each other. I hope that happens again here. And I hope we learn something. That's what we go through, these crises, whether it's mudslides or earthquakes or hurricanes, and everything's going to change. And then I wonder how much of it does. We just go back to the same way we're doing things before until the next one.
Yep. Look, we'll see how it plays out. Again, like I said, our thoughts and prayers are out there for the people that are impacted in any way, shape, or form, and we'll just keep our fingers crossed for the best. And like we've done with other tragedies in the past, you got to put your head down.
It's going to take a while for this.
It's going to take time.
It's going to take time. All right, take us out. Where do you want to take us here? What's coming up? This is the new year. We're starting off on a rather negative note here.
Yes. Look, I'm hoping we'll be back here next week with some more positive news. And relative to the fires, we'll have a new president. And hopefully there'll be some news in the Middle East that's positive and productive. And I think there's many things to look forward to that potentially are positive that would send us in the right direction. And all you can do is keep your fingers crossed and hope that it starts going there.
Okay.
And hopefully this brings people together, which it usually does, regardless of race or political belief or anything else. This is a human issue, and people got to come together and try and help each other out. So, with all of that said, thanks for tuning in. I am Barry Saywitz. We will be back here next week on Let's Talk Real Estate. Thanks, and we'll see you again next week.
There you have it. You've been listening to Let's Talk Real Estate, your weekly BS with Barry Saywitz about the current state of the real commercial real estate market right here in Southern California. On Orange County's only community radio station, OC Talk Radio, streaming live from our studio here at the University of California Irvine's Beale Applied Innovation Center.